to be here this morning. Normally, Saturday mornings are dedicated to taking my daughter to horseback riding. And she, this morning, found out she was driving to Boca Raton, not to the Redlands in southwest Dade County. But when she got here and found out that that wonderful program that Harris explained and talked about for the kids is going on, her eyes just lit up. And it reminded me of how important reaching out to that generation is in the work that we're talking about today. You're in for a real treat this morning. You have some of the best speakers behind me that you are going to find on these issues. The woman, by the way, climate change, let me tell you, John and I are here to talk, but woman rule on climate change. I have never seen so many dedicated people working on this, but in particular, the professional folks that I'm working with at the county level, at the state level, at the national level, they're all women. So they have gotten the work together, and I praise them, and I'm happy to be the first speaker introducing this issue that they're going to get into in depth from the perspective of Southeast Florida. It's funny, I was scribbling together my notes and thoughts this morning, and I had this article which I downloaded, and I was looking at it, and it's called Thoughts on Leadership for Sustainability, Holding the Door Open on Climate Change. And somebody came up and tapped me on the shoulder and said, I saw you reading my article. Nancy Schneider, where's Nancy Schneider? Look, this is another woman, another expert in our community. You have so many resources available to you that are nationally recognized. And speaking, John Englander is going to speak later, and Nancy's article talks about that. She also really tags some of the difficulty of dealing with climate change. It's difficult for us to get our arms around an issue that is so complicated, that it has episodes that we can acknowledge. A high tide flooding event out on the Miami Beach or in Fort Lauderdale. You can go out and wait around and figure out, well, something's going on. Why is this water here without any kind of a storm that has occurred or a rain has come up? Something different is going on. But in part, those episodes are really part of a much longer, multi-generational set of circumstances that have been going on for centuries, thousands of years, and will go on in the future. The natural patterns that affect our climate and our global world. That, we can sort of think about that, but to get an action plan behind some of those things, that's the challenge. And I think you'll hear today about how you can parse that out, how you can think about the issue in a way that you can find your connection to it, your way of being able to do something on a regular basis, and then combining with others to make a difference. I want to relay two personal stories of some of my experience over the last 10 years in this climate change area. It'll frame the work that you're doing and you'll hear about, and hopefully you'll leave to do the work here in the region of Southeast Florida, which is a critical area for climate change issues to be discussed and acted upon, because we live in a vulnerable area to climate change. But as you approach the public policy issues at the local government level, city level, regional level, you'll be cognizant of the fact that a lot of this is framed to some degree in our state capitals, Tallahassee for us, and in Washington, D.C. There's been a very uneven approach in the last 10 years at the state and federal level. And my experience from that, working both at the state level and national level, has left me with a few benchmarks, which I'll share with you, which I think will perhaps help you as you go forward. At the state level, really very little was discussed about climate change impacts until Governor Charlie Crist was elected. And he was elected after a campaign within which the word climate change was never spoken. And it wasn't until he got to the podium at his inaugural speech that Governor Chris said, I believe climate change is an issue which will have significant impacts on the state of Florida, and we need to do something about it. A lot of us in the audience nearly fell out of our chairs. Charlie Crist was the last person we thought would raise this issue. But by raising it as the chief executive, the chief planning officer in Florida, the person who appoints many people in state government, he opened the door for a conversation which really illuminated these issues for a few short years at the state capitol in Tallahassee, and in many ways empowered the group that you'll hear about later this morning. Governor Crist, and followed by the cabinet, the Attorney General, the Chief Financial Officer, and the Agriculture Commissioner, they started having conversations about climate change. They invited scientists up to talk. They engaged a task force of Floridians to study the issue and to produce a climate change action plan. I remember Governor Crist saying, we need an action plan, not just a plan, something that moves us forward. He went to the legislature. They must have been sleeping when he talked to them, because he convinced them to pass some legislation which sets some benchmarks for acting upon some of the issues. They didn't commit. They said, hey, Department of Environmental Protection, go out and study this issue and bring us back some recommendations. They created an Energy and Climate Commission, 9 citizens appointed throughout the state, and I was appointed and asked to chair that. It combined 2 really key public policy issues, energy and climate. A lot over the years we've talked about energy going back to the 1970s when the Gulf Wars caused a huge pricing a jump in the price of gasoline, and many public actions were taken to address that. And the long history of dealing with efficiency and trying to get alternative energy. And the production of energy here in Florida produces about half of our greenhouse gases emissions. So on that side of trying to address the cause of climate change, putting energy and climate together was very important. And on the climate side, we started looking, in addition to ways that we could mitigate the impacts of producing energy, or our transportation sector producing greenhouse gases, we started to seriously look at adaptation. And that's not a surrender. It's really a realization of the fact that we have to prepare ourselves for what could be a series of events, some of which we can anticipate, others of which we'll probably be surprised. But an adaptation strategy is one which is very important to an area like Florida. So what happened in this state story about energy and climate? Things went along pretty well. The governor had 2 large summits here in Southeast Florida. A lot of our speakers attended and participated. But then, as happens, elections occurred, and the issue just went off the radar screen. It became almost too hot to handle. It wasn't on Governor Crist's agenda for his campaign. It certainly wasn't on the agenda for the other candidates. The legislature basically lost interest. They actually repealed the authority for the Energy and Climate Commission. It no longer exists. They repealed many of those steps they took, actually in 2008. By 2011, they were repealing them. It wasn't the kind of positive reinforcement that the local folks down here were looking for. But you know, in that situation where the governor, the executive branch, we had a new governor, again, no interest in climate change, a legislature that was actively repealing it, the group that came together as the Southeast Climate Change Compact, they found an opportunity. They were able to work within the system, in the legislature, with members of the legislature from Southeast Florida, with the leadership, and in a bill that generally has been seen in the last couple of years as a bill that really had negative impacts because it changed the way we do planning in Florida. And I'm not going to get into that. That's another subject for another meeting. But in that same bill, this group, the Southeast Florida Compact, they were able to get an amendment passed which created the opportunity, not a mandate, but the opportunity for cities and counties to address adaptation action areas. Now, again, I think the legislature was sleeping because I don't know how they accepted that. But that is a tribute to the kind of concentrated work that the Compact does. And you should take that as a lesson, we all should, that even in the worst of circumstances, in certain political levels, there are opportunities to make small strides forward and to set the stage for when there is new leadership, both in the executive branch and in the legislature, that we can move the issue forward. In Washington, the issue has had somewhat of a similar roller coaster event. It wasn't too long ago that the Congress was debating bills on climate change and that the executive branch was proposing initiatives. Congress is, like the Florida legislature, has moved away from the issue, and there's no real consensus right now on taking action at the congressional level. But clearly there's still direction at the executive branch. And there's great opportunity to work with the executive branch agencies that are in Southeast Florida. We are so privileged to have many dedicated federal scientists and policymakers who reside in Southeast Florida, many who are dedicated to work on Everglades restoration. People like Dr. Opie Sequeira, who will be speaking later, who's with the Water Management District, works closely with them. These are nationally recognized scientists that are available to work, and they do partner with us. So even though the federal congressional level produces a somewhat negative perception on these issues, there's a great opportunity to work on these issues at the executive branch. And even in Congress, an opportunity will arise that will allow a small step forward. Recently, Congress considered the Flood Insurance Act. Now that's a very important law federally. Many of you who may live near the coast are required to have flood insurance. And there are a lot of issues about how that flood insurance works. But in reauthorizing that bill, advocates were able to get language in there about sea level rise and climate change. Totally unexpected. No one thought that that would happen in the political climate. So again, a real strong signal that if you're nimble about what you're doing in these campaigns to have an impact on public policy, opportunities will arise for you to make strides forward. And then you'll never know when that change in leadership will offer an opportunity to really make gains. And I'm convinced that because of groups like this that are meeting all over the state and in the country, those kinds of changes are ahead of us, and the leaders are ahead of us. I believe that at the executive branch now, there's great opportunity for moving ahead if Congress does not do it. So out of those personal experiences of working with leaders at the state level and at the congressional level, and having an opportunity to work with the Compact leaders who have taken up the challenge in Southeast Florida of moving these issues forward, I'd have 6 lessons or benchmarks to share with you that I think are key to this issue. One has been already mentioned, and that's stay focused on the science. Be sure that you are working with the scientists to understand what they know, what they don't know, and what they're prepared to stand behind in terms of projections. The second point is directly related to the first, and that is the importance of understanding how important communication is in this issue. Because scientists and policymakers like myself and many others, we tend to talk in our own language. We do really well talking to people who do similar work. But in this area, we really need to work with professionals who can help us prepare the message. Take the information on science, take the information about what's going on in our communities, and really pull together the message. And don't be afraid. We have experts in our community that do exactly that, and you need to pull them in. That'll help the scientists be more successful. It'll help you make your message to the policymakers, be they county commissioners or elected officials in Tallahassee or Washington, be far more effective. Third, it's really important to be opportunity-driven. As I said in my two experiences, when I saw those small successes, but real benchmarks that were made in Tallahassee and in Washington, one to create adaptation action areas, the other to modify the Flood Insurance Act, nobody would have thought ahead of time that that's what was going to happen. But well-informed professionals, supported by citizens, were able to move ahead in those areas because they saw the opportunity and they acted on it. It is an issue which we have to continue to reach out to people on all sides of philosophical and political barriers. It has to be a bipartisan, nonpartisan issue. We have to look no further than the way the League of Women Voters handled the Fair Districts Act in the last 4 or 5 years. A real problem that our state was having with gerrymandering districts. And their action, bipartisan action, working with citizens, its success in the polls last November, and the changes it made, I guess it wasn't last November, it was several Novembers ago, but the changes that occurred because of that citizen-led effort is the evidence to me that we can make progress on these issues, as difficult as they are. I normally have an iPhone in my pocket. My daughter stole it from me this morning because she says she needed it for whatever she was doing. That iPhone, with the camera behind it, is one of the most powerful communication tools that we all have. It totally changes the way the world receives information. And, you know, our children and grandchildren can tell us how to use it. But and that ability to take that picture at a key time of someone making a speech, of someone walking through an area that happened to be flooded, and to put that into the world of the internet has completely changed the way communication takes place. And for those of us like myself who you know, went to law school writing all my notes out on yellow pads, it's amazing to me how the world has changed in those 30-plus years. And absolutely we need to use the technology offered to us to move this issue forward. Last point is that in many cases, and I'm sure Obi will talk about some of the opportunities that are presented to the Water Management District and to the county governments, there are things that occur on an everyday basis. Decisions are made by our elected officials and appointed professionals. They spend our tax dollars. You know, they are worried about the regional drainage system. They're building a new highway or reinforcing A1A. They're making decisions about our ports and airports. They need to do these things in terms of maintaining them. Those are the very opportunities that we can take to say, hey, wait a minute, while you're doing this, why don't we do an extra level of investment, which we won't regret because it's going to help the original challenge, what we're doing. Let's think about this, add climate change to the equation, and if we have to slightly modify what we're doing, let's do it that way. It's not about passing a brand new climate change initiative or creating the Department of Climate Change. It's about looking for those opportunities in the things that government does on a regular basis that we can impact at the budget hearings or at the other times. And I think the professionals you'll hear about this morning are doing just that, and they need support because many of these activities will provide what we call co-benefits. It'll provide better drainage, but it'll also provide us some insurance in the short run on dealing with the impacts of climate change as we go forward. I really am pleased to be here and to be part of the panel that you're going to hear from. You really are now going to hear from the experts. And Carolyn, should I take questions now, or we take it as a panel later? How do you want to proceed? Like, yes. Thank you very much, and enjoy your day.